Hey guys, so today we're going to be starting our new novel study, and the novel that we're going to be working on is actually by Kate DiCamillo. And I know you guys remember that name because we had read one of her books, and I honestly really love this story. It's called The Tale of Despero. And if you take a look at the cover, you can see a little mouse, and you can see this little medal. This gold medal is the Newbery Medal, and that means that this is a really well-written book and that a lot of kids really enjoyed it, and that's why we're actually going to start reading it as our novel study. We did the same novel study with Tiger Rising, so we're doing something very similar. Now, what you should have done before beginning this video, and if you didn't do it yet, go back and do it now, take a look at the word wall that I posted, word wall. It's right above this video, or maybe it's right below it. It's one of the docs, the Google Docs that I posted. There are a couple of words in this that you might not know, and just like we have a word wall in the classroom, we're going to have a working word wall, a living word wall, if you will, one that kind of changes and adds on as we go. So you're going to take a look at that, and before we start this, you should already have looked at those words. This way you kind of know what the words mean when you hear them in the sentence. And this will be the first one. A mouse is born. Chapter 1. This story begins within the walls of a castle with the birth of a mouse, a small mouse, the last mouse to be born to his parents, and the only one of his litter to be born alive. "Where are my babies?" said the exhausted mother when the ordeal was through. "Show me to my babies." The father mouse held one small mouse up high. "There is only this one," he said. "The others are dead." "Mon Dieu, just one mouse baby?" "Just the one." "What will you name him?" All of that work for nothing," said the mother. She sighed. "It's so sad. It's such a disappointment." She was a French mouse who had arrived at the castle long ago in the luggage of a visiting French diplomat. Disappointment was one of her favorite words. She used it often. "Will you name him?" repeated the father. "Will I name him? Will I name him? Of course I will name him. But he will only die like the others. Oh, so sad. Oh, such a tragedy." The mouse mother held a handkerchief to her nose, and then she waved it in front of her face. She sniffled. "I will name him. Yes, I will name him. This mouse is Despero. For all the sadness, for all the despairs in this place. Now, where is my mirror?" Her husband handed her a small shard of a mirror. The mouse mother, whose name was Antoinette, looked at her reflection and gasped aloud. "To say," she said to one of her sons, "get for me my makeup bag. My eyes are a fright." While Antoinette touched up her eye makeup, the mouse father put Despero down on a bed made of blanket scraps. The April sun, weak but determined, shone through a castle window, and from there squeezed itself through a small hole in the wall and placed one golden finger on the little mouse. The other older mice children gathered around to stare at Despero. "His ears are too big," his sister Merlot said. "They're the biggest ears I've ever seen." "Look," said a brother named Furlough. His eyes are open, Papa. His eyes are open. They shouldn't be open yet." It is true, Despero's eyes should not have been open, but they were. He was staring at the sun reflecting off of his mother's mirror. The light was shining onto the ceiling in an oval of brilliance, and he was smiling up at the sight. "There's something wrong with him," said the father. "Leave him alone." Despero's brothers and sisters stepped back, away from the new mouse. "This is the last," proclaimed Antoinette from her bed. "I will have no more mice babies. They are such a disappointment, and they are hard on my beauty. They ruin for me my looks. This is my last one. No more." "The last one," said the father. "And he will be dead soon. He can't live, not with his eyes open like that." But reader, he did live. And this is his story. Yes, Despero Tilling lived, but his existence was cause for much speculation in the mouse community. "He's the smallest mouse I've ever seen," said his Aunt Florence. "It's ridiculous. No mouse should have ever been born this small. Not a Tilling." She looked at Despero through narrow eyes, as if she expected him to disappear entirely. "No mouse," she said again. "Ever." Despero, his tail wrapped around his feet, stared back at her. "Those are some big ears he's got, too," observed his Uncle Alfred. "They look more like donkey ears, if you ask me." "They are obscenely large," said Aunt Florence. Despero wiggled his ears. His Aunt Florence gasped. "They say he was born with his eyes open," whispered Uncle Alfred. Despero stared back hard at his uncle. "Impossible," said Aunt Florence. "No mouse, no matter how small or obscenely large-eared, is ever born with his eyes open. It simply isn't done." "His pa, Lester, says he's not well," Uncle Alfred said. Despero sneezed. He said nothing in defense of himself. How could he? Everything his aunt and uncle said was true. He was ridiculously small. His ears were obscenely large. He had been born with his eyes open, and he was sickly. He coughed and sneezed so often that he carried a handkerchief in one paw at all times. He ran temperatures. He fainted at loud noises. Most alarming of all, he showed no interest in things that a mouse should show interest in. He did not even think of food constantly. He was not interested in tracking down every crumb. While his large, older siblings ate, Despero stood with his head cocked to one side, holding very still. "Do you hear that sweet sound?" he said. "I hear the sound of crumb cakes falling out of people's mouths and hitting the floor," said his brother Toulouse. "That's what I hear." "No," said Despero. "It's something else. It sounds like, honey." "You might have big ears," said Toulouse, "but they're not attached right to your brain. You can't hear honey. You smell honey. When there's honey to smell, that is, which there isn't." "Son," barked Despero's father, "snap to it. Get your head out of the clouds and hunt for crumbs." "Please," said his mother, "look for the crumbs. Eat them to make your mama happy. You are such a skinny mouse. You're a disappointment to your mama." "Sorry," said Despero. He lowered his head and sniffed at the castle floor. But, reader, he was not smelling. He was listening with his big ears to the sweet sound that no other mouse seemed to hear. So, before we go on to the last piece of the book that we're going to read, I want to quickly go over a couple of things that we just heard. So we know that Despero, this little mouse, was born, but something was kind of weird about him. Number one, he was born with his eyes open. Now, if you know anything about mice and hamsters and all of them, they don't open their eyes. Even puppies and kittens don't really open their eyes for a little while. They keep them closed when they're still a baby to protect them. But this mouse had his eyes open when he was born, so that's a little different. And his parents, and even in the picture, his aunts, his uncles, his siblings, if you look in this picture right here, you can see his ears are really, really big. He's got a really long tail, and he's very small, much smaller, they said, than all of the other baby mice. And he was the only one of his litter, and a litter is a group of mice that were born together, or a group of animals, really, that were born together. He was the only one to live, and he's so little and he's so small. We also found out a couple things about his mom. It seems like his mom is more concerned with what than she is with Despero. She's more concerned with her looks. She had the baby and she immediately wanted to marry and she wanted to do up her makeup and look beautiful. So we already know that maybe Despero has a little bit of a weird family life. And we know that he has a lot of siblings. It said that he had a lot of siblings and that he lives in a castle. So we found out a couple of things about him, and we found out that he can also do something that other mice can't. He can actually hear food better than he can smell it, which is really interesting. So we'll see how that comes into play in the next chapter or in the rest of the book. Chapter 3, Once Upon a Time. Despero's siblings tried to educate him in the ways of being a mouse. His brother, Furlough, took him on a tour of the castle to demonstrate the art of scurrying. Move side to side, instructed Furlough, scrambling across the waxed castle floor. Look over your shoulder all the time, first to the right, then to the left. Don't stop for anything. But Despero wasn't listening to Furlough. He was staring at the light pouring in through the stained glass windows of the castle. He stood on his hind legs and held his handkerchief over his heart and stared up, up, up into the brilliant light. Furlough, he said, what is that thing? What are all of those colors? Are we in heaven? Cripes, shouted Furlough from a far corner. Don't stand there in the middle of the floor talking about heaven. Move! You're a mouse, not a man. You've got to scurry. What? Asked Despero, still staring at the light. But Furlough was gone. He had, like a good mouse, disappeared into a hole in the molding. Despero's sister, Merlot, took him into the castle library, where light came streaming through tall, high windows and landed on the floor in bright yellow patches. Here, said Merlot, follow me, small brother, and I will instruct you on the fine points of how to nibble paper. Merlot scurried up a chair, and from there hopped onto a table, on which there was a huge open book. This way, small brother, she said as she crawled onto the pages of the book, and Despero followed her, from the chair, to the table, to the page. Now then, said Merlot, this glue here is tasty, and the paper edges are crunchy and yummy, like so. She nibbled at the edge of the pages, and then looked over at Despero. You try, she said. First, bite some of the glue. Then follow it with a crunch of paper. And these squiggles, they're very tasty. Despero looked down at the book, and something remarkable happened. The marks on the page, the squiggles, as Merlot referred to them as, rearranged themselves into shapes. The shapes rearranged themselves into words, and the words spelled out a delicious and wonderful phrase. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, whispered Despero. What? Said Merlot. Nothing. Eat, said Merlot. I couldn't possibly, said Despero, backing away from the book. Why? Said Despero. It would ruin the story? The story? What story? Merlot stared at him. A piece of paper trembled at the end of one of her indignant whispers. It's just like Pa said when you were born. Something's not right with you. She turned and scurried from the library to tell her parents about the latest disappointment. Despero waited until she was gone, and then he reached out and with one paw touched the lovely words, Once upon a time. Okay, sorry guys, my video got cut off for some reason, so I'm going to finish this chapter. Despero waited until she was gone, and then he reached out with one paw and touched the lovely words, Once upon a time. He shivered, he sneezed, he blew his nose into his handkerchief. Once upon a time, he said aloud, relishing in the sound, and then, tracing each word with his paw, he read the story of a beautiful princess and the brave knight who serves and honors her. Despero did not know it, but he would need, very soon, to be brave himself. Have I mentioned that beneath the castle there was a dungeon? In the dungeon there were rats, large rats, mean rats. Despero was destined to meet those rats. Reader, you must know that an interesting fate, sometimes involving rats and sometimes not, awaits almost anyone, mouse or man, who does not conform. Now, remember we read the word, we had the word conform in our word wall that I had you guys take a look at. So this sentence really says, reader, you must know an interesting fate, sometimes involving rats, sometimes not, awaits almost everyone, mouse or man, who does not fit in. Conforming is like fitting in. So this is a fate that awaits anyone who is not the same as the people around them.